All right, this is World War II Part 7. We're going to continue with the European theater. Okay, we just talked about the leader of the French resistance, Charles de Gaulle, and now we are going to continue that with the winter of 40 and 41. The main event during this time is the Battle of Britain. Okay, this is the air war over Britain that was going to basically precede Hitler's invasion of Britain. Basically his belief is that let's soften them up and then go in there and invade. Okay, the Luftwaffe basically sends whatever they could and drops everything they had onto Britain. England suffers from these terrible raids. Okay? And at first the Nazis only attacked at night. Block after block of the English cities were destroyed. Then they started even attacking during the day. People slept in subways. Here's a picture of people sleeping in the subways. And what's crazy is these people don't look, I mean, all hell's breaking loose above the ground, but these people are singing songs and they're making the best of things. They don't, their spirit isn't destroyed like Hitler thought. Okay, they actually unite and become stronger. Even the royalty at the time, they don't leave like a lot of other places. They'll actually go down into the subway and stay with the common folk, which is really where the love of the royalty comes from, of people even today in Britain. A typical raid, there would be about 1,500 Luftwaffe planes and about 1.4 million pounds of bombs. I mean, that's what's being dropped on these areas. Now, what's left to fight is the RAF, the Royal Air Force. They had about 650 planes at the time. So you can tell they were just outnumbered. And the Luftwaffe would just send everything they had. The Brits used a new invention to help track this called radar. And they did an incredible job of defending. Churchill would go on to say, and I quote, "Never have so few done so much for so many. Never have so few done so much for so many." And what they did was just incredible. I mean, how they're outnumbered was amazing. And they will basically defend Britain. And in fact, basically after the Battle of Britain, the Luftwaffe will never be the same. Okay, and this is where you start to see a lot of infighting in the Nazis, especially between Göring, the leader of the Luftwaffe, and Hitler. Göring did not agree with how Hitler was using the Luftwaffe. He thought he was basically, sending them to destruction because of what was going on in the Battle of Britain. So you start to see a little infighting there. By the spring of 41, basically all of Europe was under Nazi control except for Portugal and Spain, which we've talked about with that being under control of the dictator Francisco Franco. Switzerland, who was neutral, which was basically under control of the Nazis unofficially, and then Sweden and Turkey, kind of the same situation in those places. But that was it. Okay, they had it all. However, Hitler made his first huge mistake, big mistake. Instead of continuing to bombard and eventually invade Britain, called Operation Sea Lion, he backs out of that, changes his mind, and then goes after the Russians, which would be called Operation Barbarossa. And why did he do this? They needed the Russian raw materials, food, etc. They were hurting because of the English blockade. I don't know. I mean, those are the best reasons out there, but it is a huge mistake. I mean, you got to think, Britain didn't have the war materials necessary to really defend their country, but Hitler changes his mind and goes after Russia. supposedly he was another factor was, how they were going to land on those beaches and things like that. That was a big factor. So hopefully he was thinking that he could maybe starve Britain out, but obviously that's not going to work. So now, of course, now you got Russia. Okay, here's a great political cartoon of depicting this. So what's going to happen now with Stalin? Okay, Stalin, he didn't trust Hitler, so he actually annexes Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania. He's taking up bits and pieces of land too to act as that buffer zone, and they will actually make a neutrality pact with Japan as well. So Stalin avoids a two-front war. So that's pretty good thinking on Stalin's part. And then, as we both know, as they both knew, that this was not going to last. So in June of 1941, Hitler rips up the Nazi-Soviet pact and invades the Soviet Union. That's called Operation Barbarossa. And you can see a great political cartoon of, good old friends, and stab them in the back. So the Nazis will invade the USSR, which basically marks the beginning of Hitler's downfall. Okay, Russia loses 600 miles of territory almost instantly. Okay, and they begin what's called the scorched earth policy. Now that's one very controversial thing that they do. Look at this map here. You can see here's Moscow. Okay, look how close it gets to being overrun. But basically, the Soviets will burn everything in their path of retreat. So as the Germans go farther and farther into Russia, they run out of supplies, and they have to keep this supply line going somehow, and they overextend that, and it's going to actually slow them down. It's a very controversial tactic, but it works. Okay. But for the people that live in those areas, you can understand. I mean, everything's just burned. Crops, shelter, you name it. And that's their own land. But, like I said, in their case, it does help with the war effort, but very controversial. They destroy everything and anything, so the Nazis would have to supply themselves. And just how brutal the fighting is, over 20 million Russians will be killed in World War II. And that's not just troops, that's civilians as well. Leningrad suffers 900 days of bombing. It's over right around 3 years of bombing. I mean, that's insane. In October of 1941, the Germans are at the gates of Moscow, but then Russia's best ally comes to help them. Anybody want to guess what that is? We've had a little taste of that this year as well. Winter. Okay? Winter slows everything down, both sides. I mean, it's just the snow is unbelievable. The cold, it just slows both sides down where there's very little fighting. And now the Germans, it kills their supply lines. So they can't get supplies to those forward lines, so they're basically left starving and freezing. Okay, Hitler announces victory, but then the Russian winter comes in and just crushes everything. It's a great political cartoon, the Russian winter smashing Hitler. Okay, here's another cartoon of the German soldiers marching in. There's a Nazi symbol, and then boop, dead. And that's basically what's going on at this juncture. And then December of 1941, Pearl Harbor. So the Americans are now going to get in. Okay, so this is going to change things, as now the Allies have the United States. And maybe more importantly, their weapons. Now here are Hitler's three major mistakes. Not invading England, invading the Soviet Union, and then after Pearl Harbor, he'll declare war on us. So now we have no problem declaring war on them as well. Okay, and I love the what if questions. You guys know that. What if he would have invaded England? What if England was taken over? Where are we going to launch a counterattack from? That's scary. Okay, 'cause I don't know where. So it's not going to happen. And then by invading the Soviet Union, we're automatically setting himself up for a two-front war. And then the timing of it too. What if he would have started his attack a few weeks earlier before the winter could set in, and they have taken Moscow? Something that another Hitler blunder. And then by declaring war on us, it just then it's very easy for us to declare war on them. So we can also jump right into the European theater, and that's exactly what we do. Okay. 1942 is the worst year for the Allies. Things are going terrible, and that's really important to remember that. When we enter this war, things are bad. I mean, we're like, a lot of people are thinking, are we too late? Okay. Many Russian cities have been devastated by the fierce attacks. In northern Africa, the war moves down to Africa as well. British are defeated there. They almost had like another miracle at Dunkirk there. The most famous German general, Erwin Rommel, also known as the Desert Fox, basically pushes Britain almost out of Africa. His troops are called the Afrika Korps. There's their symbol. Okay, you might see some of this in the Indiana Jones movies. And then the great fear is simply that the Allies fear the Nazis would overrun the Middle East and even penetrate India and then join forces with Japan. And we're basically, at this point, we're seeing this happen. Okay, it's that bad. So the Axis powers came very close to that in 42 and almost won the war at that point. Okay. However, in October, we will see the first turning point. And that will be El Alamein. Okay, oops, went a little too far there, sorry. El Alamein is the first major turning point of the war. General Montgomery pushes Rommel back. The British 8th Army chases Rommel, and the Brits will actually defeat Rommel and the Afrika Korps at the El Alamein, and will push the retreating German panzer divisions west toward Libya. Okay, in November 42, British and American troops here we go, here's our fighting. They land on the beaches of Morocco and Algeria, and they're going to basically form a vice and squeeze off Rommel. And at this point, this was the greatest amphibious operation at the time, and we know that D-Day is going to overshadow that. But the Axis forces were then caught between the Americans to the west and the British to the east, and the Axis army in Tunisia actually surrenders. Rommel actually surrenders at the hands of Eisenhower, General Eisenhower right here. And all of North Africa was now in Allied hands. Okay, the Germans were very upset, but now they see that the southern part is vulnerable, so they will have to occupy all of France at this point. Oops, hello. So, and then for those occupied territories, things are going to get a little rougher too. The Germans start to take out their anger on the civilians. Okay, 1943, FDR and Churchill meet at Casablanca, Morocco, called the Casablanca Conference, to basically discuss the planned invasion of Europe. How's it going to go? Who's going to be involved? The Russians are begging for help at this time. They want us to open up a second front to ease their problems, and we're going to try to oblige in that. Not necessarily wanting to become friends with Stalin, but we're kind of forced into that relationship, as we'll see. So the Russians begin a major counteroffensive at the same time of this meeting, and basically they come out and say they start to push the Germans back, that they will not consider anything less than an unconditional surrender. Okay, so that's our goal here. In July, we'll open up that second front, the invasion of Italy. It starts in Sicily. Oops, we'll get a little crazy today. Americans, Brit, and Canadians invaded Sicily, which is at the southern tip. They are led by General Patton, one of our most famous generals, and General Montgomery. They have this little rivalry going on to see who can get up the coast of Italy first. The message to the Italians was to die for Mussolini and Hitler or live for Italy and civilization. And the Italians went over. They actually demand Mussolini to resign. Okay, and he'll be thrown in jail. And then Hitler will literally save him, Dukes of Hazzard style, break him out of jail. And Mussolini will then be a puppet. Okay, he's rescued, goes to northern Italy, sends troops in to basically take over Italy. So the Allies will now be fighting German troops in Italy. Okay, most of the fighting is done between German and Allied forces, not the Italians. And we'll see that change too. U.S. troops will land in Salerno. Major fighting in Salerno, Cassino, and Anzio, and with that puppet state that was been set up. But a lot of the fighting will be done with German troops. All right, we will stop there, guys. Went a little bit over. Sorry. Stay classy.